welcome to the D3D4 Football Podcast with me, your host, James Richards. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another D3D4 Football Podcast. It is the 8th of December, so we're moving well along into the month. We've got a lot to talk about today because it was quite an action-packed weekend. And some interesting talking points coming from D3D4 social media feed last night. So a lot to talk about in that regard. I'm joined by Chris Stringer as always, and I'm delighted to be joined by Nathan Ridley, our Carlisle United correspondent, who has been with D3D4 pretty much from the start and back on the pod after a big gap. Nathan, welcome back to the pod.
Yeah, good to be back. I haven't been on for a while, but no, it's nice to be back.
Good to have you. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, not just on the game yesterday at Morecambe, but really what's going on at your club. You know, there's been a few underwhelming appointments in the divisions this season. We've got probably three to talk about, in fact, today, so that's going to be interesting. So let's get on with the show. Let's start, as we always do, in League One.
League One.
Right, so last night I made the egregious error of suggesting that Phil Parkinson wasn't the real problem at Sunderland. I took a hell of a shellacking, it has to be said, from Sunderland fans for a good couple of hours on our Twitter feed last night, telling me how wrong I was, which is fair enough. I can admit when I'm wrong, but interestingly, like there were some comments about how shite the football is, how rubbish it is. I mean, I never thought I'd see Sunderland fans saying how good Jack Ross was as a manager. It's funny. I had a lot of them telling me that Jack Ross was so much better than Phil Parky. And, you know, you can't deny results have taken a massive dive. Wiseman Say podcast suggesting that you know he's ripped everything up rather than just tweaking it and trying to improve on what was not a bad record that Jack Ross had. You know, you could see that he was a bit negative. He's now come in, Phil Parkinson, and those guys who watch it week in, week out saying it's dreadful football, hoofball, ripped the whole sort of plan to shreds. No one wanted. I mean, they're all underwhelmed by his appointment in the first place. I mean, to be fair to myself, I'm a little bit biased because Phil Parky played when I was a kid for Reading, and he was a guy I really admired because my uncle's a big Reading fan. So I've got that kind of bias. So to be fair, like maybe I'm seeing it through tinted glasses somewhat. But to take what Sunderland fans said on board about the style of the football, Chris, you know, eight defeats in 12, it's kind of telling its own story, isn't it, really?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I think you've got a point that, you know, Phil Parkinson isn't the only issue at the club. But then as a fan, you know, you've got to be thinking things were okay with Ross. They weren't blowing things away, and they probably did need a change if they were to take the club to that next level. And it has taken that massive nosedive, and you've got to think, how long do you give Parkinson to turn this around? Well,
according to Sunderland fans, they've already given him too long. You know, awful run of form that they're on. I think is it 3 away defeats in a row? Is that right? It's 3 or 4 now.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, 4 consecutive away defeats in the league. That's the first time they've had 4 consecutive away defeats in league football since April 2017 when they were in the Premier League.
Wow.
Yeah. So they even in that crap season they had in the Championship, they did not lose 4 games straight on the road in the league. So this is how bad they've been. And you know, the 5-0 win over Tranmere kind of hinted that things might get better. But since then they've lost to Shrewsbury. They did beat Southend 1-0, but that's Southend. Beating Southend.
I mean, they're losing to teams that they should be beating.
Yeah, they lost at home to Burton, and now they've gone to Gillingham, and they've lost 1-0.
It's not the heavyweights of the league they're losing to. It's sides that they should really, really be quite comfortably beating with the money they've spent and the quality of players they've got. So if maybe Parkinson is part of that issue, but I think there really needs to be a big look at the club's structure as a whole.
Well, Stuart Donald, when he came in, I got the feeling this was a guy who was really sort of communicating well with fans. He was really getting his plans and his ideas and his vision for the club across. It seems to have died somewhat, that sort of interaction with the supporters. I might be wrong, but I feel that there's a little bit of a disconnect there. A lot of fans venting anger towards him, probably because he decided to appoint Phil Parkinson. I mean, you've just seen Hearts pick up Daniel Stendel. That's a very good appointment, I think, and they've missed out on that. Nathan Jones is available. I mean, again, after what he did at Stoke, is he going to come to a club like Sunderland? Don't know, Nathan, your take on this, because you watch a lot of football. It's a conundrum for Sunderland because they are a club with massive ambitions, and yet they're not fulfilling anywhere near that level at the moment.
It absolutely is, and I think one of the most worrying things I would say is that since that Tranmere game, they've either scored no goals or one goal in the games. They have got a lot of firepower. You look down the list of their attackers: Charlie Wyke, Duncan Watmore, Chris Maguire, Will Grigg, Mark McNulty. That is a line that in the past few years have accumulated a lot of goals. And even though, obviously forwards can go through barren spells and struggle at different teams, you just expect that, they'd be scoring a lot more goals. And,
You just say that strikers go through barren spells at certain teams. Every single striker at Sunderland is going through a barren spell at Sunderland.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You've got Chris Maguire, hero at Oxford, and a great player. You've got Mark McNulty, hero at Coventry, scored loads of goals, great player. Charlie Wyke, really liked at Bradford, hero at Carlisle, really liked. Will Grigg, for sure, a hero at Wigan. None of them being either used properly or playing well. And it's not just Phil Parkinson. I mean, this was probably harking back a little bit to the Jack Ross tenure as well.
Yeah, it wasn't. I think, there'll surely be a lot of behind-the-scenes issues because you'd expect that could be the only reason of holding a club like that back. It seemed that the reset button had been, they'd been pushed so far down into League One that they'd just bounced back up by default. But it shows how difficult it is. No one would have expected that Wycombe were top of the league and Sunderland would be, kind of dwelling amongst so many other teams that have similar aspirations. I mean, you look at the past few years, Fleetwood, Portsmouth, they have been nowhere near where Sunderland have been. It is strange to think, and you wonder where it's just probably been an accumulation of strange decisions and disagreements. And I mean, it's been documentised on Netflix, but there generally is, there'll be a tough feeling there. And I think, whatever Phil Parkinson does next is huge because it won't be long until they pull the plug if they really start panicking and thinking promotion, because they'll be still thinking about automatic promotion, I assume. It's slipping away.
Oh, I think if that'd be hugely ambitious, to be honest, to get automatic promotion from this position. It's a worry. I'd like to hear some more thoughts from Sunderland fans about the whole thing, but time to cut their losses. It does seem strange. I'm not really sure bringing another manager in now. I mean, if you're going to do it, Nathan, would you say you do it before January?
Possibly, because how important January is, and it probably gives the new manager an excuse to say, that's not my team, these aren't my players, I need to rebuild with them, and it prolongs that stay. Daniel Stendel has been picked up, and I think a lot of people would just put two and two together and assumed, he'd want the Sunderland job, but Stendel, he built something pretty special and pretty, a real togetherness at Barnsley. Maybe he looked at Sunderland and just thought he couldn't do that. It's a big club. It's probably quite difficult to pull every asset of that club pulling in the right direction because no one has been able to do it. Manager after manager, even in the Premier League, that could sustain anything. It must be a torrid job. But yes, unfortunately, the reality of football, they're possibly looking at candidates now. They're probably going to have to prepare in the winter period. It comes thick and fast, and all of a sudden you can find yourself in a position which you didn't expect in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, big problems if they drift any further. As it stands, Sunderland are currently on 26 points after 18 games. 31 points is currently the marker where the playoff teams are lying. So it's only 5, so that's a realistic target. But 10 points adrift now of the automatics. That is a bit of a worry. So if you're a Sunderland fan, you're looking at we felt before the season started that they clearly had a good enough squad to go up, and they should go up. Sunderland should be one. They shouldn't really be in this division, and I'm not saying any club is too big to fail. We've seen it before. Man City down this level, Leeds down this level. That's fine, but when you look at the way they were going and the way they've set up and getting to the playoff final last season, this has been more than underwhelming. And Phil Parkinson, I don't know. I mean, stick or twist. I think the owners will. I feel that owners will probably stick for now, but I'm sure all the Sunderland fans who were giving me such a hard time yesterday will probably hope for the opposite. The other big game that took place in League One yesterday was the Fylde Coast derby between Blackpool and Fleetwood. And yeah, so I mean, Nathan, Joey Barton, he kind of made a rod for his own back in this one, didn't he? Because he made comments about Blackpool being a smaller club than Fleetwood, which is just ridiculous in itself. And then they go and get beat 3-1.
Yes, it really was a bit of a strange turn of events. I think Simon Grayson knew what Barton was up to. I think he'd been around the rodeo a few times in terms of mind games. And, I mean, the headline from the Gazette on the morning was, Blackpool aren't a big club and we have better players. That is a heck of a strong statement. I think yes, Fleetwood have done very well, but Blackpool, there is a resurgence there. They'd probably say they're out of their darker time. And, they're looking forward. And, I mean, other than the headline-grabbing scenes with the supporters, it sounded like Blackpool, they were comfortable, they were up inside 11 minutes, Fleetwood won't have took much confidence from that, and I think, the atmosphere, as ever there, they've got a heck of a lot of passion at that club, and it is a historic club, Barton he'll probably know himself that what he said wasn't quite true, because there really is history at that club.
There is massive history. Jimmy Armfield, played for them, they had some wonderful times. They are essentially a club that has fallen away through poor ownership rather than being a small club. And you look at their level and where they should be, you'd argue Championship. Premier League is probably, they'll be one of a number of clubs who feel that they could compete to get in the Premier League. But yeah, Joey Barton, it came back to bite him. Some poor defending as well from their part and a 3-1 defeat. Blackpool flying at the moment up, I think, to 4th actually after that, because Peterborough obviously and Ipswich dropping points in their quest to chase down Wycombe. Wycombe, they'll be loving this weekend. It's done them quite a few favours. So they've had a rest and no one has overtaken them. So they'll take that all day long. But yeah, Blackpool fans will be absolutely delighted. And Simon Grayson did say that Joey Barton is wasting his time with mind games. And I think actually he probably played a little bit into Simon Grayson's hand in that respect. Bolton and AFC Wimbledon drew 2-2. Marcus Force, another brace, a great prospect. He looks out of Brentford, really good young player. I look forward to seeing how he progresses. I think he'll need to play and stay at Wimbledon and enjoy his football this season to give them a boost to stay up. Obviously, we saw Coventry and Ipswich play out a 1-1 draw. Chris, this was a pretty big game actually, and I would suggest that was a fair result.
Yeah, I absolutely do. Really, really even contest. Ipswich, I think you expect a little bit more from them, but it's another point. Coventry's been a difficult place to go for a lot of teams this season. So
it's not even Coventry though, is it? It's funny. It's Birmingham, and yet they're doing such a good job of playing there.
Exactly. It's an absolute fortress, and I say it every week, but I really can't stress it too much. Just how good a job Robbins is doing to make Birmingham such a good place for them.
Well, Birmingham obviously taking note because they've been linked with him this week.
Well, yeah.
If they sack Pep Clotet, I don't know. Mike Warburton was also linked with being sacked, wasn't he? And I think Gareth Ainsworth linked with that job. So there's loads of these sort of moves potentially on the cards. I don't know where people get the idea or the rumours that a club's about to sack their manager, because so far they don't necessarily have come to fruition. So I'm not sure if it's just a load of rubbish, to be honest. One thing I would say, we talked a lot about Sunderland. We didn't give Gillingham any credit for the win. So let's give them their dues, because that's a good performance. You talk about how average Sunderland are, but you have to beat what's in front of you, and Gillingham certainly did a good job of that. Great finish by Conor Ogilvie from a left-footed strike into the top corner from a centre back who Matt from Jules in the Blood always tells me is he's improved, and that is now his best position. And I think on evidence that was, I mean, had a bad week. I can't remember, it was against a couple of weekends ago where they made quite a few errors in a home game and got beaten. But actually, generally speaking, Gillingham's data looks good. Their prospects of the second half of the season look pretty good. Steve Evans is the manager, so they'll probably sign at least 6 or 7 players in January, knowing his record. So yeah, not too bad at all. Oxford, my boys drew 0-0 with Shrewsbury. Great credit to Shrewsbury, ex-Oxford boy Sam Ricketts coming back with Dean Whitehead, a pair who, especially Dean Whitehead, fondly remembered by all Oxford fans at the club. And they put on a really good tactical display and probably were unlucky not to be winning in that first half. But in the end, I'll take a point because Oxford obviously had James Henry come off injured. Anthony Ford taken to hospital, breathing problems after cracking his ribs. I hope it's not a punctured lung or anything serious. Obviously, we send our best regards to him. Portsmouth and Peterborough played out a 2-2 draw. Not at all surprised that this was an entertaining game. Both teams full of attacking talent. And in the end, I think Peterborough will be happy to go to Fratton Park and take a point because, this is a much better looking Portsmouth side. Actually, Pompey fans, let's have your thoughts on Twitter about, Kenny Jackett. I mean, you were dead against him a few weeks back, saying that he had to go. I'm just looking at the record, and it's 6 unbeaten, I think, now in the league. No, 7 unbeaten, I do beg your pardon, in the league. Haven't lost since that defeat at Wimbledon.
It looked unfortunate not to win yesterday as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think they've only had, is it 1 defeat in 12 or 13 in the league?
I think it might be. They're showing why everyone was touting them for the automatic promotions, and this rough start that they've had is firmly in the past, it seems. Though.
Well, they were struggling to attacking wise. They've been criticised for being too defensive, but they've put 4 past Southend, 3 past Rochdale, 3 past Rotherham, and 2 past Peterborough in the last 5 games. So, yeah, I don't think there's any issues there. And like I said, I didn't want to see Kenny Jackett sacked. I know the football wasn't great, but sometimes managers just need a bit of support, a bit of time. They go through blips, and that was probably his. Accrington went to Tranmere, 1-1 draw. Good second half from Tranmere, but they were probably, on the reflection of Mickey Millen after the game, he said that this was a fair result, and I think that's fair to see. Ian Bradley knew or predicted that Rochdale would come and beat Rotherham. They have a great record at the New York Stadium. They beat them 1-0. Really big result for Rochdale.
He'll be pleased about that because Rotherham are out of the playoffs now.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't want too much excitement, does our Ian? I think he's not a championship fan. I think for a club of his size, I think it's very difficult. Doncaster 1-1 draw with MK Dons. They'll be a bit disappointed with that, Chris.
Yeah, I think they will do. MK Dons, we've spoken in the last few weeks that they've been really poor, and Doncaster we're sort of thinking that they're not doing as much as they really should be doing.
And the firepower is what I've heard from Doncaster fans, really sort of critical of their options going forward potentially.
Yeah, it does seem that way, and you would have thought that going into a game against a struggling team like MK Dons, it would have been a real chance for them to fire on, and it just wasn't the case.
No. I mean, they've had, I think Narlinis has been injured, and that's been one of the problems. Kieran Sadlier, I don't know. I mean, he's a player that was started the season really well, flying. I don't know if he's been injured, but he was playing yesterday, sort of on the left of a front three. Rakesh Bingham, I think, started up front. Coppinger just off him. Alfie May in there. But after years of having someone like John Marquez, it is difficult to replace that sort of striker, that key player.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what's going to be so difficult. I mean, they started yesterday with one true striker and sort of 3 in a sort of slightly attacking role, and that's something a lot of teams attempt and few can master. And so I think that they do really need to try and have a look in the January window. Can they spend a bit of money to get someone better in up front?
Agard and Mason with Boateng supporting them. I like that. I think that's good for MK. And finally managing to put 2 fit strikers on the pitch at the same time. So something to be proud of and relieved about at the same time, I think, from their perspective. Nathan Ridley, what do you make of Southend this season? 2-0 up yesterday, and then they did a Southend. They imploded.
Absolutely. I mean, looking at the record, the red days is pretty unbelievable, and it's strange to see. Unfortunately, if Bolton weren't obviously so restricted, you'd be looking at Southend as the absolute, strugglers of the division. I think Sol Campbell, he did do that good job with Macclesfield, but there's probably the argument to be made that in League Two, especially with only 2 relegation spots, and it
a more attritional style of football, perhaps as well.
Yeah, possibly it might have been easy to find his feet. A little bit. It's obviously probably a bit tougher tactically, and the quality's there. And he'll be still assessing the squad. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, it's a real killer. Especially away from home, managing to take the league, and it wasn't as if they're flashing the pan lead. They'll have been comfortable with the lead. For the full first half. You just wonder if they've got into the dressing room and Sol Campbell's has to change something, or the players feel like they need to do something different, or
I think the penalty at the start of that second half was key, and the confidence just disappeared very fast.
I think that's the thing, really, is that Sol Campbell, I think, is a good manager, but there's so much to deal with at Southend.
Did you see his post-match interview? He's so resigned when he said that second half. He just sort of shook his head.
I mean, how do you legislate for that? I mean, you've got a team that's gone out at half time 2-0 up, and they've come out and they just look bereft of confidence. They give away a silly penalty, and then they give away a silly second goal, and then from there, Bristol Rovers, the side that we've spoken of a few times, they've got real quality in that side. You can't give them that sniff.
They've had a great season as well, and that half-time team talk, Graham Coughlin was delighted with the response of his players. Absolutely delighted. Obviously, his assistant manager, Chris Hargreaves, ex-Oxford midfielder, linked with the Grimsby job. We'll talk about them in a bit, because obviously they're on a bit of a downward spiral. But yeah, Southend, that just leaves them well adrift from plumb bottom. One last team I will say to speak about, Lincoln City. Fantastic 2-0 victory over Burton. Huge credit to Michael Appleton, and huge credit to the Lincoln fans for not giving him too much of a hard time. There are a few who are frustrated and perhaps venting it at him, but as an Oxford fan, he was pretty average when he first came in that first season, until he managed to get his players in and get his message across, sort it out. That's a very good result. I mean, I know Burton are no shakes at home. They've had some issues, particularly with scoring goals on home soil, but it was a good performance from the Imps. I'm absolutely delighted to see Harry Anderson on the score sheet. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a great little player. And I think if you look at Lincoln's squad, people are saying, we could get sucked into a relegation battle. I don't truly believe that, because if you look at their defeats they've had, or their games, they beat obviously Sunderland 2-0. Since then, they lost 2-0 at Peterborough. That's a tough one to take, 2 late goals. They drew 0-0 with Shrewsbury, who are a very tough side, as Oxford found yesterday. Lost 1-0 on the south coast to Portsmouth, who are top team. Going to AFC Wimbledon, who actually beat Portsmouth at home. That was a slightly disappointing result, you could say, but again, a late goal, frustrating for the Imps in that one. A loss at Gillingham, and then by a single goal again. So it's all very fine margins, and I think once Appleton gets his ideas across and changes it round, probably will use the window in January to bring in a few more players that he will want to sit in his system. But I'm confident that the Imps will be safe this season, consolidate, and just watch this space. Michael Appleton's a terrific coach. He's got a great team to manage, great supporters behind him, and I think a very supportive ownership and chairman. So this could be an exciting few years to come for Lincoln City. But as it stands, Wycombe are top with Ipswich second, 40 points and 36, so 4-point gap. So even if Ipswich now win that game in hand, they will still not overtake Wycombe. Peterborough, Blackpool, Bristol Rovers and Coventry making up the top 6, or those playoff positions I should say. Bristol Rovers, fantastic to see them up there. I'm really pleased for them. Oxford, Rotherham and Fleetwood just outside Portsmouth in 10th. Keep an eye on them. I'm sure they'll be right in the mix. Sunderland bang on mid-table in 11th at the minute. You've got Bolton bottom, Southend and MK Dons still in that bottom zone. Tranmere will be disappointed they didn't get probably the result their second half performance deserved yesterday in some respects, but there's a 3-point gap now between them and the relegation places. Right, League 2, plenty to talk about. Not all good as well, unfortunately, but let's jump in there and have a word about it now.
League Two.
So first thing before we get on to any of the positive football is there was an incident at Forest Green's game yesterday where a fan, I think it's a single fan to be fair, was using racial...
Small group, was it?
What was it, sorry?
Was it a small group?
I'm not sure. I've seen someone saying it's one fan, someone saying it was a couple. So it was a very small number of people, if anything, but they were using racist language towards, I think, players on the Scunthorpe team, and quite rightly called out on it. Great to see the fans of Forest Green reporting these idiots. The protocol that they've put in place, so the referee went over, spoke to both managers, explained the situation. I think if it happens again, they stop the game. I'm really pleased we're making steps, but I still find it hard to stomach, Nathan, that in this day and age, we have any sort of racism in football. And indeed, I mean, it's a society problem, isn't it, really?
Definitely. I think whatever you can think about, society at the moment, what the world's like, there'll always be some sort of division. There'll always be people who vent their frustration in total unacceptable ways. And, you saw it in the Manchester derby last night. Even one of the most watched, I think the Manchester derby is probably one of the most watched games of the year, every time. And the fact that someone sitting so near to where the cameras will have been for a corner, he wasn't, it's not like they're trying to do it discreetly. It really is, not to alienate them as not, you can't, but you really can't understand what goes through the head. You really, you have to almost trace it back why they're doing this, why have they chosen to do that, it's like this disconnect between, players and fans. And nowadays, fans maybe think, they're not as close to players, and the players, they're not quite on the same level. But the reality is, a fourth division game, how close you are to the players, especially somewhere like Forest Green. Everything will affect them. And I think, yes, it's football, but there's got to be some idea of, you've got to be accountable and sensitive, and it really is. It really is
disgusting. There's just absolutely no excuse for it. No excuse for racism at all. It's I don't care. Like people say, oh, well, how these people brought up, blah 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 blah. They're idiots. They shouldn't be allowed in football grounds. I think once they found out who these people are, they should be banned from football for life. I know it's a criminal offence as well, and I hope they get the book thrown at them. I'm really sick and tired. We see it in Italy, and you think, what is wrong with these people? I mean, what is? I think an Italian paper tweeted out the headline Black Friday for a game between Inter and Roma because it had Lukaku and Chris Smalling on the front page. Disgusting, ridiculous.
For all the comments you can make, I just don't get why you'd bring race into it. I can't get my head around it. It's just a completely bizarre and alien thing to me to consider bringing up.
Yeah, it must be so disgusting, and it must to be kind of picked out and feel for the colour of your skin or wherever there's discrimination in all forms. It's absolutely it's probably the worst thing, insulting your heritage, your family, people, your loved ones, because that is who you are, that is the makeup of who you are. It is absolutely horrible, and it is hard to fathom, and I think it is hard to find an answer. But I mean, Manchester City responded very quickly last night, and they'll be given a stadium ban, and that's the right thing, and it's happened before. But you really hope that there would just be some sort of, and it may take time, and it's horrible to think that people will still suffer, because people suffer, up and down non-league from the top to the bottom every Saturday and Tuesday night.
We've seen loads of cases of it. I think that's what's worrying me. We're seeing loads and loads of cases of it where
seems to be growing almost.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. It is growing. We've seen it with Dover. I think it was Dover, Hartlepool, Yeovil, with the Harringay players walking on. I mean, it's just, do me a favour. What is wrong with people in society where you think that it's okay to give abuse firstly to anyone, and then racist abuse, which is just archaic and pathetic.
I'll tell you what, though, we've given stick to the governing bodies of football in the past, but the protocol worked, bang on. At Forest yesterday, the linesman told the referee who stopped the game, and they sorted it out from there, and I thought that was fantastic to see.
Yeah, no, I do agree, and I think as well, shout out to Harry and Gay for their walk off. I think that needs to happen more often, because you can't just accept it. You can't make it. You can't normalise it. You can't accept it. It needs to be taken so seriously, because you're never going to stop it otherwise. And I'm sick and tired of giving minutes to it. But there you go. In the game, of course, Scunthorpe improved their record to win by a single goal. Another suspension, though, slight concern, because they've had some real injury problems this season. I'd like to know where they'd be if they hadn't had all the injury issues. But Paul Hurst, given time, really good run of form that Scunthorpe are on. Whether they can continue to go, can keep this going. I think they've had they're 6 unbeaten, and I think it is 1 defeat in 10 now. So really good turnaround of form there from Paul Hurst. And no one will be that surprised given the quality of manager he is. But there you go. Really good run of form, and good to see. Bradford beat Newport by a goal to 0. Newport's form has suffered of late. I do fear for them a little bit. They're a good side, and it's a long season. But again, you'd be concerned if you're dropping form and having some struggles. Cambridge beat Plymouth yesterday, Chris, in a game where actually Cambridge really played well, and they've been a side that have been very hit and miss, though their numbers actually are better than perhaps people give them credit for.
Yeah, they've had a little bit of an upturn since we played them a few weeks ago. Sorry. And Plymouth will be really disappointed with this, but absolute credit to Cambridge. They looked really good value for money for this win. I think they'll be really happy. And it puts them now into sort of a, possibly even, dare I say, playoff contention.
Well, quite possibly. Yeah, they're not consistent enough for me, but we'll wait and see how this result and this performance lifts them. John Dempster, it looks like his days might be numbered. I mean, I don't see how he can get more time from a 3-0 home defeat to Cheltenham. Carl, the fan that always talks to us, the Mansfield fan, did say it was not as bad as the scoreline suggests, but even so, when you consider the money they've spent and the fact that, I keep saying it, Paul Tisdale's available, they do so well under him, I think.
I agree. But you can't give Cheltenham as much time on the ball as they gave them, and they were duly punished for it. Yeah,
they were, and it's a poor result from Mansfield. Their home form has not been good enough, and home is where the fans' heart is, isn't it? That's where you get your bulk of support. That's where you get your bulk of your money. So if your home fans start ebbing away, you could be in trouble. Great to see Harry Pell back playing and scoring a 1-0 win for Colchester against Salford. They've got their big cup game coming up, so good luck to them in that one, but a very good result in the league. Left it late, but it doesn't matter what time you score as long as you win the game. Oldham and Leyton Orient played out a 1-1 draw, a bit of an improved performance from Oldham, but still frustrated Dina Marmot after the final whistle. And I noticed that Port Vale, this is their first home defeat of the season as well, losing to Walsall, who are again another side under Darryl Clark, slowly but surely making some headway. And the exciting thing for them perhaps is that they've got some budget left to bring in a couple of players. But I think Cohen Lavery and Josh Gordon could be quite an interesting partnership. I know, I think Josh Gordon started with Adebayo up front in this one, but Lavery did come on, and I think he's a player I like. And it was Adebayo actually scored the winner. So strikers scoring for Walsall. It's say it quietly. Hasn't happened much this season. Yeah, Crawley 0-0 at Stevenage. They sacked Gabriele Cioffi. Now I know Gabriele quite well, having gone down to Crawley. I felt this was a bit hasty, if I'm honest, especially considering the disastrous refereeing decisions that went against him in the last 2 games. A lot of Crawley fans, though, supported it. They then brought in John Yems, who, I mean, he's a good guy in football. A lot of players saying he's a good guy. But if you're a fan who is seeing a long-standing manager who's broken records go out of the door, you probably hope that the club have got someone exciting to take over.
He's never managed before, has he?
He managed Crawley at some point, I think 2008, but that was not in the league, was it?
I think he was 2006-07. He was caretaker, and then he's gone on to Exeter, and I think he was working at Bournemouth.
He's been a scout, I know that. He's been a
head of football operations.
Yeah, he's brought in Lee Bradbury, who obviously great career at Portsmouth. Went to Man City for that hefty fee, and obviously played for Oxford, and then didn't play for Oxford after the chairman decided not to allow him to have the clause in his contract. So We won't go harping on about that, but that was that's a good appointment, I think. But, I would be interested to hear Crawley fans' take on this, because I can understand this is an underwhelming appointment. You've gone and played Stevenage, drawn 0-0. It's going to. I mean, Bez Labala, he did one of those kick it with the wrong foot moves, which we've all done. So it happens to the best of us. I did see that. I thought that was quite amusing.
My only ability.
That's it. Yeah, it's one of those. But there you go. We'll have to see how that goes. But I was disappointed for Gabriele Cioffi. I think.
I thought it was a really strange decision.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit hasty. But there you go. It is football. It can be ruthless, and perhaps the owner, who's putting in a lot of money, felt he wanted a bit more for his buck. So it's his decision, and he made it. Exeter beat Northampton. Great result for Exeter, because Northampton were going great guns. I think I actually predicted the scoreline as 3-2, and it finished that way.
You got a prediction right.
I might have done, yeah. I actually got Stevenage 0, Crawley 0 right as well, and I was not surprised.
The end is there.
That's it, the end is nigh. I'm getting these predictions right, it's worrying. But yeah, no, great result for Exeter, because they've been a little bit up and down. I don't want to be harsh on them, because, this is League Two. It's a really difficult division, and they're flying, really, when you look at it. They're second in the table. But by their standards, there was a few concerns. I think Matt Taylor did allude to his worries about a couple of the performances of late. But they have had injuries, and they got the goals at key times in this game. And against the Northampton side that are doing so well, that is a fantastic result. Swindon are absolutely bossing it with Richie Wellens, Chris. A 3-0 win over Grimsby, who are a side I'm getting a bit worried about. But firstly, Swindon, another great attacking performance.
They're just unbelievable. They're just absolute. And then Owen Doyle again. He's scoring every week. I've not seen a striker have form like this in so long.
18 goals already.
It's unbelievable. 18. It's not even Christmas.
Nah.
It's unbelievable. I think you're right. I am getting a bit worried about Grimsby. The change in manager will really cost them, I think, because Jolly had something building there, I think, and he's left, and perhaps understandably so. But it's worrying times ahead. But for Swindon, I think it seems they need to improve their form against some of the higher flying teams in the league, but they're beating the teams that they go up against.
Yeah, I did see that stat actually on Quest, but Gav Ainsworth was quick to dismiss that and say it could change quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see. I mean, they did lose their club captain, Dion Conroy, for the season. That's always difficult to take, but I really like the way they. They've got Isgrove back now as well, who was a key player who they missed for a few weeks. I mean, they've got a good squad, and they've got a manager who plays a certain style of football. It won't win every week, but it's if it wins enough as it is at the moment.
And it's entertaining football, and that was always the thing when he was manager at Oldham. We might not win a game, but you'd go to it and you'd enjoy watching what we're doing. And I think that's such an undervalued trait in a manager.
Absolutely. If you watch your team lose, but at least you have a go, a lot of people will stomach that. And I think we've seen quite a lot of fans actually sort of hit out against managers, Sunderland fans right now, for example, but hit out against managers who don't play good style. So, which brings us on to Carlisle. So Nathan, what's it like? Well, no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that Stephen Pressley wanted to play a high press style with good style of football. It just didn't seem to work for him. Chris Booth gets appointed. Again, most fans would be hugely underwhelmed by that, considering some of the names available. What have you made of him so far?
Well, it's certainly been, you wouldn't expect anything less than a strange period of transition. It was a shock when actually Presley went, because it was the best form Carlisle had been in all season, and it was the day after they got knocked out of the EFL trophy, which financially might have hit the pocket, but I'm not sure anyone was bothered about. But there are, Chris Beech was, I guess he's had, high recommendation.
I might just call him Chris Booth. That's my bad.
Well, Beech is, I guess, he's obviously come in and impressed him with an interview. There's always the criticism that, people can talk the way in, and, it's actually a head coach role, which is the first time it's been changed since David Holdsworth came into director of football. Sheridan and Presley were both managers. I mean, that might just be the wording, and, the role might not be changed, but he's obviously agreed to work in that structure, and there's probably no arguing with last week, 2-2 at Forest Green, you know, although they're not in the best form. You know, the replay's on Tuesday for a trip to Cardiff. Not the most glamorous tie, but it's keeping the season alive. That's absolutely right. You know, the win at Barnsley this season is probably still the highlight of the season because the league has been so dismal and it's taken the stuffing out of a lot of supporters. And yesterday, you know, Beech, it was good to be backed by, you know, over 1,200 fans. You know, however well Carlisle are going, it's always a good day at Morecambe. You know, they've gone to Morecambe and been top. They've gone to Morecambe and been struggling. You know, it's just a great day out, and it's good for Morecambe as well. But yesterday I think he was pleased, Chris Beech, with how Carlisle had set up defensively a little bit. You know, I think he'd gone to play young Jared Branthwaite, obviously linked with Aston Villa, Rangers, Celtic, 17, in front of the back four. And although, you know, he didn't take to it like a duck to water, you could see that, you know, Beech is trying to do something else. He maybe doesn't like the idea of a three at the back. You know, he wants to play quite straightforward and try
I had a look at your lineup and I couldn't work out what formation he was going to play because it had like 4 centre backs in it essentially.
Well, he couldn't, and Gethin Jones can play wing back or full back or whatever. And the most interesting thing I thought is that in an era of, and this drives some Carlisle fans up the wall, in the era of wingers that cut inside, it was actually quite refreshing. He played Nathan Thomas on the left and Hallam Hope on the right, you know, direct, and tried to play off Ryan Loft, who struggled a bit, but the whole team really never got. It was a game that never got going. Morecambe seemed like, it almost seemed like the belief maybe wasn't there that they could get chances, and you know, that's just what it's like when you're at the foot of the table. It is hard to kind of probably always think positively running towards goal. And then Carlisle, they can have the possession, and they have got good technical players because that's what Presley wanted. But sometimes I think it's just the team's not on the same wavelength. Sometimes you think there's a lot of decisions going on in the head. What they're going to do, you know. Hallam Hopes, he scored yesterday, but it's only his 3rd of the season. Nathan Thomas, the talent is absolutely there, but you know, he got a great assist. It was the first time pass from the halfway line through to Hope, but he blazed one over after doing all the hard work. Mike Jones is still trucking away in midfield. Stefan Skugel, you know, he's promising, but his height really doesn't help. And there's just a few things, but I think one thing that Beech has to sort out is the defence, because
I was going to say, because Byron Webster's been getting a bit of stick as well, hasn't he, recently?
Yeah, and I think that when Webster arrived, it was like, you know, wow, this is probably the big man in the team. You know, he was captain in pre-season along with Adam Collin. This is going to be the leader. He's experienced, you know. But ever since, you know, Nathaniel Knight Percival can't even get in the team at the moment, so Webster's is doing better than him. But it is constant errors, and it's errors you wouldn't expect of an experienced centre back. You know, he failed to clear again on the goal, and it was a lapse in concentration to score, and the away end to be rocking, and then all of a sudden get bamboozled at the back, and Webster got dragged out. A guy of his frame, he seemed to not be able to get the ball off this man, and it ended up coming in, and John O'Sullivan, former Carlisle, managed to get in. But yeah, I suppose with Adam Collins' form last year, maybe that saved the defence a little bit, but it is a totally different team, and anyone will tell you who's played football, if you get a whole new back line, that is hard to gel together. You know,
What have you made of Elliot and Erdale both coming in? Was it from Scotland, both those guys?
Yeah, I think both quite comfortable with the wing back role, like a lot of modern fullbacks are. Iredale has been good. As much as he hasn't been massively impressive, he's made I think he made Team of the Month for October or November for League 2. And Elliot, I think he's still finding his feet. The pace of the game is maybe a little bit different in League 2 to Scotland. And John Mellish, he's looking, you know, he's got promise. You know, you probably didn't win Conference Young Player of the Year for nothing. But yeah, it's
Aaron Hayden. He looks like a good player. I saw him playing your the EFL Trophy game against Blackpool. I thought he was very impressive.
Yeah, he struggled a bit yesterday because I think he was maybe a bit of nerves. He was clearing a lot and didn't show that composure. But in the second half, he improved. But there is a kind of feeling that every player isn't quite maybe, all of them, you could make an argument that every single one of the players in that team isn't playing in the right position. But Beech, it's early days. He's had maybe 6 days of training. He sounds like he says all the right things, but that's exactly what Presley did. I think you could see in Presley in his eyes and his work ethic that he wanted it to work, and he had all the right things you'd want in a manager. And Beech sounds like he has that, and he deserves a chance, and he'll be desperate to prove himself. And I think it's a saviour that, on the game side, it's a saviour that one team is going down. And it's sad to say, and it'll be sad if more come out of the team after doing so well to scrap out of 2 places that they go. But there's a lot of teams down there. Chris, you'll know yourself, obviously Oldham and Grimsby are struggling. Later out that there's, I guess, maybe a bit of consistency and a bit of solidity, and you might get out of there. But Beech he's got a job on his hands, but I think he'll be wanting to prove himself desperately.
Well, we'll keep coming to you for your opinion throughout the season and keeping an eye on Carlisle. At the moment, though, precarious position as it stands in the division. At the top, Swindon, 39 points from 20 games, 3 points ahead of second place Exeter, who themselves are a point ahead of Forest Green. Cheltenham, a great win yesterday, and Michael Duff is doing a superb job. They're in 4th with Crewe, whose game was cancelled with Macclesfield. We haven't talked about it because we do speak a lot about crisis clubs, and I just feel that something needs to be done, and we'll keep a close eye on that. I know the owner said he's in advanced talks, but until there's anything concrete, I just take those with a pinch of salt sometimes. I get tired of getting the hopes up that clubs might be saved and then they don't. So we'll keep an eye on it, but really sad situation at Macclesfield. Bradford, they are in 6th, Northampton in 7th, and Colchester, Plymouth, Port Vale just outside. Cambridge sneaking up. We'll see if they can get a bit of consistency together. But Morecambe and Stevenage sit in those bottom 2 places, locked on 15 points. 5 points ahead of them are Carlisle, Oldham and Grimsby. That's 5 points when you're struggling. It's a big gap. So, at the moment, I do fear for Morecambe slightly more than Stevenage. I think Stevenage have got a little bit more scope perhaps to bring in players in January. But we'll see. Nathan, absolutely great to have you back on the pod. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. It's good to be back, and hopefully next time on it's a little bit more positive. But Saturday's game against Grimsby is a big game. There's a heck of a lot that can happen. As we knew from the Christmas period last season, things can change very quickly in both leagues.
They can indeed. Chris, thank you for your input again today. A few technical difficulties we've had with this pod, but hopefully you'll still enjoy it. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this pod as always. Thank you for the patrons who support us, and thank you for all of you guys who interact with us on Twitter and social media. We'll be back next week. If you haven't checked out our interview with Frankie Bunn, it was a great interview. I really enjoyed that one. That is also available on our iTunes feeds, Spotify feed, and on our website, as are our 30 Minutes with series, which we've had Scott Brown and Danny Lloyd on so far this season. We'll continue those going forward, but until next time, it's goodbye.